Okay, so now that we can walk around, let's talk about crouching. Let's add some verticality to this game here. So in most games, the capsule collision that's on the player character is what handles whether or not you can walk on the surface or whether or not you can go through things. So here, when I try and go underneath this little box, it will not let me when I'm in game because the capsule collision is way too high. So what we need to do is bring that capsule collision down here underneath the box so that we can walk underneath it. So let me show you what I have done here. So in the character that we've created and been working on here, I've selected the collision capsule component and unchecked hidden in game so I can see it when I'm testing with it. And on the VR movement reference here, which is a modified version of the standard character movement component that you get with regular UE4 characters, I've gone in and I have made sure that can crouch is enabled. This is very important because if you do not check that, then you'll be trying to crouch using the standard nodes that they supply for character movement, and it won't work, and you'll feel like an idiot like I did, just sitting there being like, why is it not working? Oh, jeez. So just make sure you have that checked because apparently it's unchecked by default. So let's take a look inside the event graph, see what we got going on in here. I've set up 3 different ways to handle crouching. Now the first way is a constant crouch. What I'm going to do here is after event begin play, going to have a little delay. Sometimes when you run straight off of event begin play, things get a little wonky, so it's nice just to have a delay, just a second or so, to give the level time to start up and do all of its crap. After this little delay, just in case, I'm going to set timer by event. So I'm going to use this node to create a custom event here and loop it so that this event runs every 0.1 second, but you can adjust it to whatever you want. And what this custom event will do is it will adjust the capsule collision to be in line with where the headset is relative to the character blueprint itself. So back in the viewport real quick, this camera here, this camera is connected to the VR root, right? So that's the capsule collision that moves around. So this camera moves around with it. So depending on where it is in space relative to the blueprint itself here, it's going to adjust the actual size of this collision, this capsule collision. So when it's up here, it'll be up here. When it's down here, this will adjust to be down with it. So in order to do that, I'm getting the VR replicated camera, just right here, just bringing that down, getting its relative location, breaking that vector, and then dividing the Z by 2 because the capsule here is actually the half height is what sets that. So the capsule half height determines how big the capsule is, how tall it is. So I'm going to divide the relative location of the camera, the Z part of that specifically, divide that by 2 to get the capsule half height. Now I'm going to add another 10 because it's actually setting it to the origin of the camera, which will make it more feel like it's at your eye level. So you won't really have like a forehead or the top of your head anymore. So I'm adding 10 here to give you a little bit of a head above your eyes. And then using this node, set capsule half height VR, which just needs the VR root reference. And I'm making sure that update overlaps is on so that it'll properly recognize when you have moved into, say, moved into the box and it won't let you move anymore because of that. Now I've got a note here to maybe use a trigger in the world to activate or deactivate this, because I don't think it's something that you'd want to have on all the time. Depending on what you're doing, it'd be nicer because it's a little bit of an expensive event to run, especially if you're running it constantly. You might want to set up a trigger, say, around a box like this so that you activate this event to say, hey, I care about if I'm too tall or too short now in this area. So I'm going to turn on that event and check and see, am I tall enough or am I not? But when I'm outside of this area where it actually matters whether or not I'm too tall or too short, I don't really care. So let's turn off that event and not run all that for no reason. So when I'm out and about over here, I don't really care if I'm too tall or too short. But when I get over here, I kind of care about that. So let's turn that back on. and adjust depending on where they are looking, where the player character is holding their head, just to save yourself some cost there. So let's see this in action here. Let's give it a shot. So here you can see after the 1 second delay, the capsule did change its position there so that we got that bar in the middle of the screen. And as I move the headset around, every 0.1 second it will adjust and keep that in line with where my head's at. So let's turn on the controller here and move around. So here I'm going to be too tall. It won't let me go underneath it. But if I go low enough, it'll let me come through. I come back up, can't go through, and so on. So fantastic, that's that one, which is probably what you'll want to use most of the time. But another thing you could do is, let me unhook this and bring it down here, is actually set it so that you're only adjusting the capsule collision if they are a certain threshold below their standard standing height. So in order to do that, what you first need to do is get what the actual standing height is. So again, after begin play, I'm going to wait a second and then say, okay, wherever the headset is right now is where your standing height is. It's something that you should probably put in like a menu and then, have a little dial that'll go around and say, all right, make sure you're standing normally at your standard height. And then we'll set that to, determine where your crouching is after that. So here again, we're just going to get the camera going to get its relative location in this blueprint. Break that vector and get the Z value, and then set that to the standing height. So again, I have it on my desk right now, so whenever the level starts, after a second, it'll say, all right, this is what your actual standing height is. So I know how high I need to make the character, right? So you can use that to also adjust how tall the character is and how far the arms go out, stuff like that. But for now, I'm just using a delay after event begin play to set it. Then, in order to set a crouching height, these are both just standard float values that I've added to the blueprint. I'm going to divide the standing height by 1.25. So let's say if you were at 100, it'll be 80. That would be the threshold for, say, all right, you're standing at 100 usually. Once you move down to 80, now you're crouching. So I set this variable to the crouching height here, and then start another timer by event. So a new custom event called check for crouching. I'm going to loop it every 0.25 seconds. And check and see, all right, is your camera's location less than or equal to the crouching height? If it is, then we're going to say, are you already crouched? Yes, okay, you don't need to do anything else. If you're not already crouched, then let's go ahead and crouch you. This is the standard node in UE4 for any character that will just set the character's capsule half height to the crouching half height that's set up for it. So again, in this movement reference here, we have the crouched half height. So you can set that here to determine how low it actually goes when you set it to crouch. So you can make it, crouch even further than you normally would, or higher, whatever you want to do. If we are not less than or equal to the crouching height, then we're above that. We're standing above whatever the crouching height was set, which was divided by the regular standing height. So we're basically standing up or not crouched quite enough yet to activate this. So we're going to uncrouch if that is true that we are already crouching. But if we're not crouched already, here we don't need to do anything because we're already at the position we should be. Again, this is something that you can do. You can clear this timer if you're not in an area where it matters whether or not you're crouching or not. But let's see that in action now that we got it hooked up. So we set the standing height there. Now we're going to have to move lower. So the characters are always going to be a certain tallness. It's not going to change depending on where you are. So it's like it won't matter if it's a kid or an adult that's playing the game. But once they get lower than their normal standing height, it will move that capsule down so they can get underneath this box. And then when you move back up, it'll go back up to way up there. Again, since I'm basically at half of what it should be here on the table. So the capsule height is way up there. And it thinks I'm that tall. But I'm actually right down here. Again, go down. Cool. Get up past that. And I'll be back up. The last way of doing this is more of a standard way where you just hit a button. So you could make it, say, the grip button or any button on the controllers or on the keypad, gamepad, whatever else you're using. So here we're just going to press a key. Let me make sure I undo this. I don't want the active at the same time. It will not work properly, at least. So here we're going to press X, and when we're pressing X, it's going to crouch. Again, that's just that node that's in the standard character movement component stuff that'll set you to the crouched half height. And then, in order to make the VR headset actually look like it's down to where it should be, we're going to set the VR capsule offset. So this is from the VR root reference, and what we're going to do is grab the movement reference, grab the VR root reference, get the capsule offset, the current capsule offset, and add the crouched half height to that. Adding to the Z value will actually bring the VR headset close to the floor. So because we're grabbing the crouched half height, we're always going to bring it down to where it should be. So the player actually doesn't have to move their head at all. They could be in a seated position and still hit the button, and it will seem to them like they're actually crouching in the world. And then when we release this button, it'll uncrouch, and it will subtract the crouched half height from the capsule offset and then set it. So let's see that in practice here. Here I am at the regular standing. I'm going to hold X, and that'll bring me down. You see how it moves the camera as well with it, but I'm actually not moving the headset at all. So brought that down. Now I can move underneath the box, come back up, release the button, and now I can't anymore. So it's a nice way if you don't want your players to actually have to move their headset around. They could just be in a seated position or standing, and they can hold the button so they don't actually have to move themselves down, and this will move them down regardless. So those are 3 different ways that you could do it. Add some verticality to your level. And just remember, it's really about what your world is and what you want the player to be able to do. So you design your functionality based around that to work properly with whatever you're doing. So design your crouching stuff and give them however many options you want them to have based on what you want them to be able to do. And how often you care about them being able to move underneath things, or if you don't really care, then turn it off, stuff like that. Just keep that in mind when you're developing it.